All right, moving on now. Will the country head to fifth elections? That's the question on everyone's mind as the final polls conducted before Election Day on Tuesday, all suggesting continued political deadlock. As neither the anti nor the pro-Netanyahu blocs are expected to receive 61 seats in order to form a government. Naftali Bennett's Yamina party, however, which is currently uncommitted to either bloc, could give the anti-Netanyahu parties a coalition. Yesh Atid leader Yair Lapid and Netanyahu's biggest challenger speaking to Ynet this morning in a rare interview, saying it's not so black and white.
אני מסתכלת על הנתונים, לפחות לפי מה שאנחנו רואים עכשיו, זה נראה או ממשלת נתניהו או מערכת בחירות חמישית.
אני לא יודע על בסיס מה את אומרת את זה. שמעתי את המשפט הזה, הוא פשוט לא נכון. אני אומר, אנחנו עכשיו, יש מולנו דווקא המרחב, אפילו קצת פחות, אפילו עם אלה עם הנתונים הפחות טובים, אומר שיש מלחמה על המנדט ה-61. שם אנחנו נמצאים.
באיזה הרכב של ממשלה?
יש 61 מנדטים, או כמעט. אנחנו ממש על הקסקס מ-61 מנדטים, שאומרים, נתניהו לא יהיה ראש ממשלה במדינת ישראל.
Meanwhile, Public Security Minister Amir Ohana briefly posting a picture on Facebook Friday in which he's seen shooting a target with the, quote, center block written on it 4 days before the March 23rd election. The picture is from an interview that Ohana gave to Israel Hayom newspaper, which is affiliated with Israel's pro-Netanyahu conservative right wing. Ohana deleted the post soon after, saying that he was shooting at a target with terrorists on it and that the words hinting at his Likud party's political rivals were added later without his knowledge. Meanwhile, the largest gathering of its kind in months, up to 50,000 people demonstrated outside the home of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem over the weekend, calling for an end to his leadership just 3 days before the country's fourth election in 2 years. Well, Gabbi Briner is a journalist and will be doing special coverage for ILTV during our live elections broadcast. Let's talk to her about what to look forward to on Tuesday. Gabbi, thank you so much for joining me today.
Great to be here, Lauren.
So everyone seems to be calling, like I said, Naftali Bennett the kingmaker in this election. What exactly does that mean, and what does he have the power to change in this upcoming vote?
Right. So, Lauren, to answer your question, let's go back a bit and have a look at exactly how the Prime Minister in Israel is chosen. So after the election, the President holds a meeting with all the party leaders and they recommend one person as Prime Minister. It doesn't necessarily have to be the party with the most seats, but it does have to be the majority have to appoint this leader. So as we've seen, as you said before, we've got an anti-Netanyahu bloc and a pro-Netanyahu bloc. That means that these parties have come out and support or against Netanyahu, which is what they'll plan to do in their meetings with President Rivlin down the track. So Naftali Bennett, where it gets interesting is he actually hasn't identified publicly, at least, whether he'll be siding with Netanyahu or siding with the anti-Netanyahu bloc. And because they're so neck and neck in the polls, he really does seem to have a lot of power leading up to this election.
Do you think it would help him or hurt him if he actually announced before the election who he was supporting?
I think part of the mystery about it all is that he is, keeping his cards close to his chest, keeping everything to himself. So it's really hard to say at this point, Lauren, with 2 days to go, anything is possible.
Okay, let's move on to Yair Lapid. Tell me what is happening in the polls, and is it possible that Lapid is going to get enough mandates in this election to get a chance to try to form a coalition?
Right. So last polls were released last Friday night, and both Channel 12 and Channel 13 polls did suggest that Yair Lapid is going to nab 18 seats, which would make him the second biggest party in the Knesset, but it doesn't necessarily mean he is going to be Prime Minister or will even have a chance of building a big enough coalition that's going to pass the 61 majority. So really, it's so neck and neck in the polls. It's really hard to say. Neither of the polls were actually able to call one bloc having a majority. So it's really, really unknown at this point. Anything is possible. It's so neck and neck, it really could go to anyone at this point.
And there's also, the parties that are getting just a few votes in the latest polls. What we're saying is on the verge of the electoral thresholds.
That's right.
What happens if those parties don't make it into the Knesset? Who could they help and who could they hurt?
So we've got three parties that in recent weeks have signalled that they might not actually pass the 3.25% electoral threshold, which is equivalent to 4 seats. That's Haaretz, which is a left-wing right-wing party and would definitely be supporting the anti-Netanyahu bloc. There's Kahol Lavan, which actually is sitting with Netanyahu right now. That's the party headed by Benny Gantz, who initially ran on an anti-Netanyahu campaign, but he actually ended up siding with Netanyahu, and he's gotten both criticism and praise for that move. Now he's down to a situation where he's actually might not cross into the Knesset. And then we've got the United Arab List. That's a breakaway party from the Joint List, and that's headed up by Mansour Abbas. He's come out very, very frustrated with how the Joint List have been boycotting the government, and he actually sees potential in joining the government to actually promote the interests of Arab Israelis in the Knesset.
What's really interesting is that entire transformation that happened to Benny Gantz. Like we're seeing in the polls, he's getting a lot fewer mandates according to the predictions, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Gabby, thank you so much for coming in today. Really appreciate it.